my name is Hannah McDonald with the Alliance Française de Chicago, and today I will be reading Part 2, Chapter 10 from Bonjour Tristesse by Françoise Sagan. It's funny how fate likes to choose faces to represent it which are unworthy or second-rate. That summer it had selected Elsa's face. Call it, if you will, a very lovely face, but it was really merely alluring. She also had an extraordinary laugh, one that was hearty and infectious, the kind of laugh that only rather stupid people have. It hadn't taken long for me to notice the effect that laugh of hers had on my father. I told Elsa to make maximum use of it whenever we were due to come across her with Cyril. I would say, whenever you hear me approach with my father, don't say anything, just laugh. And then, whenever my father heard that exaggerated laughter, I would see his face cloud over with fury. My role in directing these events never ceased to enthrall me. I never missed the mark, for whenever we saw Cyril and Elsa together, openly engaged in a relationship that, although imaginary, was perfectly imaginable, my father and I would both go pale, the blood draining from my face as it did from his, sucked away by a desire for possession which was worse than pain. Cyril bending over Elsa. That was the image that ravaged my heart, and yet it was an image that I helped them to bring to perfection without realizing its potency. Words are easy, companionable things, but whenever I saw the outline of Cyril's face and his smooth, sun-tanned neck bent over Elsa's upturned face, I would have given anything for that not to be. I kept forgetting that it was I myself who had willed it. Aside from these incidents, and suffusing our everyday life, there was Anne's confidence, her gentleness, and, it pains me to use the word, her happiness. She was in fact closer to happiness than I had ever seen her, and although she had given herself over to the egoists that we were, she was far removed from our tempestuous desires and my low little schemes. This was precisely what I had counted on, that her aloofness and pride would instinctively prevent her from employing any kind of tactic to bind herself more closely to my father, would prevent her, indeed, from using any type of seductiveness other than that of being beautiful, intelligent, and tender. I began to feel more and more sorry for her. Pity is a most agreeable emotion. It carries you along like the music of a military band. No one could reproach me for feeling it. It happened one morning that the maid, in great excitement, handed me a note from Elsa which read as follows: "Come quickly, it's all working out." I had the impression that a catastrophe was in the offering. I hate it when things come to a head. Anyway, I met a triumphant-looking Elsa on the beach. "I've just seen your father. An hour ago." "What did he say?" "He told me he was extremely sorry about what had happened and that he'd behaved very boorishly." "Well, it's true, isn't it?" I thought it best to agree. Then he paid me various compliments, the way only he can, in that rather detached tone of his, and very quietly, as if it were causing him pain. That tone of voice. I dragged her back to reality from her idyllic visions. What was the upshot? Well, nothing really. No, there was something. He invited me to take tea with him in the village, to show that I had no hard feelings and that I was broad-minded. You know what I mean, progressive. I was greatly amused at the thought of the views my father might have on the progressiveness of red-headed young women. "Why are you laughing? Am I to go?" I almost replied that it was nothing to do with me. Then I realized that she credited me with the success of her stratagems. Rightly or wrongly, that irritated me. I felt cornered. "I don't know, Elsa, it's up to you. Don't keep asking me what to do. Anyone would think I'm the one pushing you." "But you are," she said. "After all, it's thanks to you that—" The admiring way in which she spoke suddenly frightened me. "Go if you want to. Just for heaven's sake, don't talk to me about it anymore." "But we have to get rid of that woman for him, don't we, Cecile?" I fled. My father could do as he wished, and Anne could sort herself out as best she could. In any case, I had a date with Cyril. It seemed to me that love was the only antidote to the fear that was sapping me. Cyril took me in his arms without a word and led me off. When I was with him, everything became simple and charged with intensity and pleasure. Later, lying stretched out against that golden, sweat-bathed torso of his and feeling exhausted and adrift, as if I had been shipwrecked, I told him that I hated myself. I smiled when I told him, for although I meant it, the thought caused me no pain, just a kind of pleasant resignation. He did not take me seriously. "It doesn't matter. I love you enough to make you share my opinion of you. I love you. I love you so much. The lilt of that sentence stayed with me right through lunch. I love you. I love you so much. That's why, although I've tried, I no longer remember much of that meal. Anne was wearing a mauve dress whose color matched the circles under her eyes and her eyes themselves. My father laughed and appeared to be relaxed. The situation was working out for him. Over dessert, he announced that he had shopping to do in the village that afternoon. I smiled to myself. I was tired and I was feeling fatalistic. All I wanted to do was have a swim. At 4 o'clock, I set off down to the beach. I ran into my father on the terrace as he was leaving to go to the village. I said nothing. I did not even warn him to be careful. The water was warm and caressing. There was no sight of Anne. She must have been busy with her collection, drawing in her room while my father was playing the ladies' man with Elsa. 2 hours elapsed, and as it was no longer warm enough to sunbathe, I went back up to the terrace, sat down in a chair, and opened a magazine. It was just then that Anne appeared, coming from the direction of the wood. She was running, and with some difficulty, awkwardly, with her elbows held against her sides. I had the sudden, shocking impression that it was an old lady running and that she was going to fall. I was aghast. She disappeared behind the house, heading for the garage. Then, all at once, I realized what had happened, and I too began to run, to catch up with her. She was already in her car and turning the ignition. I rushed up and threw myself against the door. Anne, I cried, Anne, don't go. It's all a mistake. It's my fault. I can explain. She was neither listening nor looking at me, but leaning forward to release the handbrake. We need you, Anne. At that, she straightened up. Her composure had gone and she was crying. Then, all at once, I saw that I had been attacking a living creature, a creature with feelings and not an abstraction. She must once have been a little girl, on the secretive side, then a teenager, then a woman. She was 40 years old. She was on her own. She loved a man, and she had hoped to be happy with him for 10, maybe 20 years. And as for me, that face of hers was my handiwork. I was rooted to the spot, my whole body trembling as I leant against the car door. You don't need anyone, she murmured. Neither of you does. The engine was running. I was in despair. She couldn't leave like that. Forgive me, I beg you. Forgive you for what? The tears continued to stream down her cheeks. She did not seem to notice them, and her face was rigid. My poor girl. She laid her hand on my cheek for an instant, and then she was gone. I watched her car disappear round the side of the house. I was lost, adrift. It had all happened so quickly. That face of hers, that face. I heard footsteps behind me. It was my father. He had taken the time to remove traces of Elsa's lipstick and to brush the pine needles from his suit. I turned round and threw myself at him. You bastard! I began to sob. What's going on? Has Anne? Cecile? Tell me, Cecile. That's all for now. Thank you.